A bucket of ice water poured over her head while his entire staff laughed. He expected her to disappear into the obscurity where people like her belonged. But in the span of one day, Robin Stark learned that the woman he'd treated as invisible had been watching, learning, and building an empire right under his nose. And now, with cameras rolling and the world watching, she was about to teach him a lesson he'd never forget. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Now, let's continue.
The 34th floor of Titan Global Enterprises had a rhythm. Phones trilled in measured intervals. Keyboards clicked like 1,000 tiny heartbeats. Voices rose and fell in practiced corporate cadences. But beneath it all, almost imperceptible, was another sound. The soft whisper of a mop gliding across polished concrete, the gentle clink of cleaning supplies being carefully repositioned, the nearly silent footsteps of someone who had learned to move through spaces without disturbing them. Diana Johnson, who went by Anna to the few people who bothered to learn her name, had perfected the art of invisibility. At 5 a.m., 3 hours before the first executives arrived, she moved through the executive suite like a shadow. Her natural hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, practical and unobtrusive. She wore the standard-issue blue work uniform with her name patch stitched above the breast pocket. Her hands, though calloused from years of manual labor, moved with surprising precision as she dusted, cleaned, and organized. The space she maintained was a temple to corporate achievement, rendered in glass, steel, and carefully calculated displays of wealth. Panoramic windows stretched from floor to ceiling along the eastern and southern walls, offering views of the city skyline that most people would pay admission to see. In the pre-dawn darkness, the buildings glowed like a circuit board of ambition and commerce, their lights reflecting off the polished surfaces Anna kept immaculate. The furniture spoke its own language of power. Leather sofas in the reception area, soft as butter and probably just as expensive. Conference tables of solid walnut, their surfaces mirror-smooth, capable of seating 16 people in ergonomic chairs that adjusted in 17 different ways. In the executive break room, an espresso machine imported from Milan sat on the counter like a sculpture, all gleaming chrome and precise engineering. Anna had learned its operation by reading the instruction manual during a slow afternoon, though she'd never made herself a cup. That machine wasn't for people like her. Original artwork adorned the walls. Anna had researched the pieces during her lunch breaks, looking them up on her phone. A Rothko in the main corridor, its blocks of color worth $3 million. A series of black and white photographs by someone famous whose name executives dropped casually in conversation, each print valued at $50,000. An abstract metal sculpture in the reception area that cost more than Anna would earn in 5 years, though she privately thought it looked like something a child might construct from kitchen utensils. Her world existed in sharp contrast, though it occupied the same physical space. The janitor's closet was tucked away near the service elevator, barely larger than a phone booth. Industrial cleaning supplies lined metal shelves, commercial-grade disinfectant in unmarked jugs, window cleaner bought in bulk, floor polish, paper towels stacked in packages of 12 rolls. Her cart was purely functional, wheeled efficiently, equipped with compartments for trash bags and microfiber cloths and the various tools of invisible maintenance. She punched a time clock that had been obsolete everywhere else for a decade, her hours recorded on a card she had to initial at the end of each shift. Anna began her morning routine with systematic precision. Windows first, working from top to bottom, left to right. The key was the right amount of cleaning solution and the correct angle of the squeegee, creating streak-free transparency that executives would look through without ever considering how it came to be. She'd taught herself the technique from YouTube videos watched on her phone during lunch breaks, perfecting it through repetition until the motion became automatic. As she worked, her mind cataloged everything. This was the unintended consequence of invisibility. People forgot she existed, and in forgetting, they revealed things they would otherwise conceal. On the desk of Harold Finch, the chief financial officer, a spreadsheet remained open on an unlocked computer. Anna's eyes tracked across it as she wiped down the desk's surface. Third quarter projections, revenue forecasts by division, a highlighted row showing a significant shortfall in the Asia-Pacific region. She didn't linger, didn't study it, but her mind filed the information away with automatic precision. In the office of Jennifer Caldwell, Senior Vice President of Operations, a confidential memo sat face-up beside the keyboard. Anna emptied the trash bin, her peripheral vision catching key phrases: restructuring proposal, workforce reduction, targeted terminations in Q1. She moved on, her expression unchanged, but understanding that layoffs were coming and knowing which departments would be hit hardest. The conference room held evidence of last night's late meeting. A whiteboard still displayed diagrams and notes that someone had forgotten to erase. Supply chain flowcharts, bottleneck identifications, projected cost savings from vendor consolidation. Anna erased the board with smooth strokes, but not before reading every word, comprehending the strategic implications, recognizing the inefficiencies they were trying to solve through methods that would likely create new problems. She didn't snoop intentionally. She didn't have to. The information simply presented itself, unavoidable, impossible to ignore once seen. Years of being invisible had given her access to the architecture of corporate decision-making, laid bare by people who assumed someone in her position couldn't possibly understand what she was seeing. But Anna understood perfectly. She'd put herself through community college, taking night classes in business administration and computer science while working 2 other jobs. She'd learned programming from free online courses, staying up past midnight to complete tutorials while her body ached from physical labor. She'd read every business book the library offered, studied case studies, analyzed market trends. The education wasn't credentialed in the way that impressed people at Titan Global, but it was thorough, comprehensive, real. At 7:30 a.m. sharp, Robin Stark arrived. Anna was restocking paper towels in the executive break room when she heard his footsteps in the corridor. Quick, purposeful, the stride of someone who'd never questioned his right to move through space with absolute confidence. She'd learned to identify individual executives by their walking patterns, a skill born of necessity. Knowing who was approaching allowed her to become even more invisible, to position herself out of the way, to avoid the awkwardness of accidental eye contact. She didn't look up as he passed. Didn't need to. She'd seen him countless times over the past 3 years, could picture him with perfect clarity. Mid-40s, dark hair maintained carefully to suggest vigor without trying too hard. Today he wore a gray suit, as he often did, paired with a deep red tie that cost more than Anna's weekly paycheck. His face carried the kind of cold handsomeness that came from privilege. Strong jawline, calculating blue eyes, a mouth that smiled frequently but without warmth. A silver watch encircled his left wrist, Swiss-made, expensive but not ostentatious. His shoes reflected the overhead lighting, polished to a mirror shine by someone he'd never met. Robin Stark was the Chief Executive Officer of Titan Global Enterprises, a position he'd held for 7 years. Under his leadership, the company had grown profitable through aggressive cost-cutting and strategic acquisitions. He had a reputation for being demanding, uncompromising, intolerant of excuses. His employees used words like exacting and high standards, though Anna had observed that these were euphemisms for something less flattering. In 3 years of working in close proximity to Robin Stark, Anna had experienced exactly 4 direct interactions. The first had been during her initial week, when she'd walked past him in the corridor and reflexively offered a "Good morning, sir." He'd looked through her as though she were constructed of air, his expression never changing, his stride never slowing. She might as well have been invisible. Perhaps, to him, she was. The second interaction had occurred 6 months later, when she'd been cleaning his office and he'd returned unexpectedly from a meeting. "Are you almost finished?" he'd asked, not looking at her, his tone suggesting her presence was an inconvenience. "Yes, sir," she'd replied. 2 minutes. He'd waited in the corridor, scrolling through his phone, until she'd completed her work and removed herself from his space. The third had been a year ago. She'd been emptying the trash bin in the break room when he'd entered, poured himself coffee from the espresso machine, added sugar from the container, and departed without acknowledging her presence despite standing less than 3 feet away for nearly a minute. The fourth interaction had occurred 3 months ago, when he'd nearly collided with her cleaning cart in the corridor. "Watch where you put that thing," he'd snapped, his tone sharp with irritation, as though she'd deliberately placed it in his path. "Sorry, sir," she'd replied, moving it immediately. He'd continued on without another word, the incident already forgotten by the time he reached his office. 4 interactions in 3 years. Each one a reminder of her status in his world. Furniture at best, obstacle at worst, never fully human. The morning progressed through its established rhythms. Executives arrived in clusters between 8 o'clock and 9 a.m., carrying coffee in branded cups, talking on phones, projecting the busy importance of people whose time was valuable. Junior staff arrived earlier, attempting to demonstrate dedication. Administrative assistants arrived earliest of all, preparing the day for the executives they supported. Anna moved through it all like a ghost, performing tasks that allowed the office to function while remaining unseen by those who benefited from her labor. She delivered supplies to the copy room. She spot-cleaned a coffee spill in the conference room. She responded to a request from an assistant to restock the break room coffee, which had been depleted during an early meeting. At 10:15 a.m., a junior executive whose name Anna had never learned stopped her in the corridor. "Hey, can you grab me a coffee?" The question was phrased as a request but delivered as a command. "I'm completely slammed." Anna was carrying a container of cleaning supplies to the storage closet. "The coffee machine is in the break room," she replied politely. "Just down the hall on your left." The executive's face tightened with annoyance. "I know where it is. I'm asking if you could get it for me. You're not doing anything important right now, right?" Anna was doing something important. She had a schedule, tasks that needed completion before her shift ended. But she also understood the implicit threat in the question, the suggestion that refusing might generate complaints, might cost her this job she needed. "Of course," she said, her voice neutral. "How do you take it?" "Black, 2 sugars. And make it quick. I've got a meeting in 5. Anna set down her supplies, walked to the break room, prepared the coffee exactly as requested, and delivered it within 3 minutes. The executive took it without thanks, already turning back toward his office, the interaction forgotten before Anna had walked 5 steps away. This was the texture of her existence at Titan Global. A series of small humiliations, each individually minor, cumulatively exhausting. Being told to move out of the way when she was already standing against the wall. Being spoken about as though she weren't present. Executives discussing weekend plans or office politics as she cleaned around them. Being referred to as the cleaning lady or the help in conversations she could hear. Having people snap their fingers to get her attention, as though she were a dog being summoned. At 11:30 a.m., 2 senior managers stood outside the conference room, voices lowered but not low enough. Anna was wiping down the glass walls nearby, visible but apparently invisible enough for them to speak freely. "Did you see Robin's memo about performance reviews?" the first one said. "He's looking for cuts. Apparently the board is pushing for better margins. I heard they're targeting the bottom 10% in every department. Doesn't matter if they're actually underperforming. Just a numbers game. That's brutal. Some of those people have families, mortgages. That's business. Robin doesn't care about sob stories. He cares about stock prices and his bonus." They walked away, still talking. Anna continued cleaning the glass, her expression unchanged. But she'd heard. She understood. And she knew things they didn't, patterns she'd observed that suggested Robin's strategy would backfire, would damage morale and productivity far more than it improved margins. But no one asked for her opinion. No one would believe she had one worth hearing. At 1:30 p.m., Anna was cleaning the executive restroom when she overheard voices from the corridor. Robin was speaking to his assistant, Melissa Park, his tone irritated. "I don't care if it's not convenient. Reschedule the 2 o'clock and push the strategy meeting to tomorrow. And find out why the Henderson contract isn't finalized. Someone's dropping the ball, and I want to know who." "Yes, sir. I'll handle it immediately." "You'd better. I'm not paying you to make excuses, Melissa. I'm paying you to solve problems." Anna heard the sharp click of Robin's shoes moving away, heard Melissa's quiet sigh once he was gone. She finished cleaning and emerged from the restroom. Melissa was at her desk, already on the phone, her voice calm and professional despite whatever frustration she might feel. Their eyes met briefly. Melissa offered a small, tired smile. Anna returned it. A moment of solidarity between two women navigating the same difficult man, though from very different positions. By 2 p.m., Anna's shift was complete. She returned her cart to the storage closet, organized her supplies for the evening crew, and clocked out at the time clock that recorded her hours with mechanical indifference. She changed in the small bathroom near the service entrance, replacing her work uniform with jeans and a simple sweater, pulling her hair free from its ponytail. She walked out through the service entrance into the afternoon sunlight, leaving Titan Global behind. But she wasn't going home. She never went home directly after her shift. Anna drove her 11-year-old sedan across town to a different part of the city, where the buildings were older and the rents were cheaper. The warehouse district had once been industrial, but economic shifts had left many spaces vacant or converted to new purposes. The building she parked in front of had been divided into shared workspace, affordable rent for freelancers and startups and people with ideas but limited capital. She climbed the stairs to the third floor, her footsteps echoing in the concrete stairwell. The space opened before her, exposed brick walls, concrete floors, high ceilings with visible ductwork, tall windows letting in afternoon light. Desks and tables were scattered throughout, occupied by people working intently on laptops, sketching on tablets, holding quiet conversations over coffee. Anna's desk was in the far corner, a folding table she'd bought secondhand, paired with a chair salvaged from an office liquidation sale. She sat down and opened her laptop, a refurbished model she'd purchased for $300 2 years ago. The screen came to life, displaying lines of code that represented hundreds of hours of work. Here, in this shabby converted warehouse, Anna Johnson, the janitor, disappeared. Someone else emerged, someone who existed only in this space and on this screen. A brilliant, self-taught entrepreneur. A programmer who'd built something revolutionary. A woman on the verge of something extraordinary that no one at Titan Global could possibly imagine. Her screen displayed a development environment, multiple windows of code in Python and JavaScript. Algorithm frameworks for machine learning, data models for supply chain optimization, business plans projecting market capture and revenue growth, patent applications filed with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, protecting intellectual property that could potentially be worth millions. Anna's fingers moved across the keyboard with the same precision they brought to cleaning, but here the work was different. Here she was building instead of maintaining, creating instead of serving. Her eyes, which remained carefully neutral at Titan Global, now lit with an intensity that transformed her face. Code scrolled across the screen. Functions and loops and conditional statements that would mean nothing to Robin Stark but represented the architecture of something that could change entire industries. Anna had seen the problems firsthand. Cleaning offices where executives complained about supply chain failures, inventory mismanagement, communication breakdowns between suppliers and logistics teams. She'd understood that these weren't isolated issues but systemic ones, problems that could be solved algorithmically if someone had the vision and skill to build the solution. So she'd started building it. 3 years ago, working alone in this space, writing code late into the night after her body already ached from physical labor. Teaching herself advanced concepts through online courses and documentation. Testing theories with sample data. Failing repeatedly and learning from each failure. The work was slow, methodical, often frustrating. But Anna had learned patience through years of being invisible, had developed persistence through years of being dismissed. She knew how to work toward distant goals, how to maintain focus when immediate gratification was impossible, how to believe in herself when no one else did. And slowly, impossibly, she'd built something that worked. Something revolutionary. Something that could potentially be worth more than Robin Stark's entire company. But that was a story for another time. For now, Anna simply worked, her fingers dancing across the keyboard, her mind fully engaged in a way it never was during her morning shifts at Titan Global. The afternoon light shifted through the tall windows, marking time's passage. Other workers in the shared space packed up and left, heading home to families or friends or whatever waited for them in the hours between work and sleep. Anna stayed. She always stayed. There was always more work to do, always another problem to solve, always another function to optimize. This was her real life, the one that mattered, the one she'd been building in secret while the world assumed she was incapable of anything beyond cleaning floors. At Titan Global, she was invisible. Here, she was becoming inevitable. And soon, very soon, Those two worlds were going to collide in ways that no one, especially not Robin Stark, could possibly anticipate. Anna Johnson, the janitor, would disappear. Diana Johnson, the CEO, would emerge. And the people who'd spent 3 years walking past her without seeing her would finally understand what they'd missed. But not yet. Not today. Today, she was still invisible. Still dismissed. Still underestimated. And that, Anna thought as she saved her work and closed her laptop as evening darkness gathered outside the windows, was exactly where she needed to be. Invisible people saw things that visible people missed. Dismissed people learned things that powerful people never considered. And underestimated people, when they finally revealed themselves, left everyone else speechless. Anna smiled in the gathering darkness. Tomorrow, she'd return to Titan Global. She'd put on her blue uniform. She'd clock in at the service entrance. She'd clean the executive suite while Robin Stark walked past her without acknowledgement, as he had for 3 years. But the clock was ticking. Change was coming. And when it arrived, it would transform everything. She gathered her belongings, locked her desk drawer, and headed toward the stairs. The warehouse was nearly empty now, just a few dedicated workers still hunched over their projects in the dimming light. Anna walked out into the evening air, her breath visible in the cold, and drove home to her small apartment where she'd eat a simple dinner, sleep for 6 hours, and wake at 4 a.m. to begin the cycle again. Invisible. Patient. Persistent. Building toward something that would soon become impossible to ignore. The transformation was coming. Robin Stark just didn't know it yet. The boardroom on Titan Global's 35th floor was designed to project power and permanence. A single table of polished walnut dominated the space, surrounded by leather chairs that cost $3,000 each. 3 walls were solid, decorated with framed awards and photographs of corporate milestones. The 4th wall was glass, offering a view of the city skyline that was meant to remind everyone present of how high they'd climbed and how far they could fall. This morning, that view offered no comfort to Robin Stark. He sat at the head of the table, his gray suit immaculate, his expression controlled, but his jaw tight enough that a muscle twitched visibly beneath his left ear. Around the table, 8 board members regarded him with varying degrees of concern and displeasure. The quarterly reports displayed on the large screen behind him told a story that no amount of corporate spin could improve. "The stock is down 12% over 6 months, said Gerald Hutchins, the board chairman, his voice carrying the flat disappointment of someone who'd seen this pattern before. "Our largest institutional investors are asking uncomfortable questions. The Pemberton acquisition was supposed to drive growth. Instead, we're looking at integration costs that have blown past projections by 40%. Robin's fingers tightened imperceptibly on the arm of his chair. "The Pemberton integration is on track. The cost overruns are temporary, and the synergies will materialize in Q2. "That's what you said last quarter," another board member interjected, a woman named Patricia Danvers who'd made her fortune in private equity and had little patience for executive excuses. "Meanwhile, we lost the Vanguard contract. That was a $15 million annual account. How does that happen? Vanguard wanted terms that would have been unprofitable for us long-term. Walking away was the strategic choice." "Strategic," Patricia repeated, her tone suggesting she found the word inadequate. "Robin, strategy requires results. What we're seeing is declining revenue, rising costs, and market share erosion. At what point do we stop calling this strategy and start calling it failure?" The word hung in the air like smoke. Robin felt his pulse accelerate, felt the familiar heat rising in his chest that always preceded his worst decisions. But he kept his voice level, kept his expression neutral. "I've led this company for 7 years. We've grown revenue by 60% in that time. One difficult quarter doesn't erase that track record." "2 difficult quarters," Gerald corrected. "And the trajectory suggests a third. The board needs to see a turnaround plan. Concrete actions. Measurable targets. We need it by next week's meeting." The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, each minute feeling like an hour. Board members questioned his decisions, challenged his assumptions, implied without quite stating that his position might not be secure if conditions didn't improve. Robin answered each question with practiced confidence, but internally he was calculating, reassessing, feeling the ground shift beneath him in ways he hadn't experienced since his early years as CEO. When the meeting finally ended, Robin returned to his office and closed the door harder than necessary. He stood at his window, looking out at the city, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. 7 years of building this position, of fighting and clawing and making the hard choices that weak leaders avoided. And now they questioned him, threatened him, treated him like some junior executive who'd missed his sales targets. He walked to his desk, opened the bottom drawer, and retrieved the crystal decanter of scotch he kept there. He poured 2 fingers into a glass and drank it standing, feeling the burn, welcoming it. The board wanted results. Fine. He'd give them results. Whatever it took. Whoever had to pay the price. By noon, word had spread through the executive floor that Robin was in a dangerous mood. Melissa Park, his assistant, sent a carefully worded email to senior staff. The CEO is handling urgent board matters today. Please direct all non-critical items through my desk. Thank you. Those who'd worked at Titan Global long enough understood the translation. Stay out of his way. The atmosphere on the 34th floor changed like weather before a storm. Voices became quieter. People moved through the corridors with studied purpose, not wanting to appear idle or unproductive. Junior executives kept their office doors partially open, ready to look busy at a moment's notice. The break room, usually a space for casual conversation, was nearly empty. No one wanted to be caught appearing relaxed when Robin might walk past. At 2:30 p.m., Robin called a meeting of his senior leadership team. 6 executives gathered in the main conference room, each carrying laptops and notebooks, each wearing expressions of careful neutrality. Robin stood at the head of the table, not sitting, his posture aggressive. I just spent 2 hours being interrogated by the board about our performance, he began, his voice cold and precise. They're unhappy. Which means I'm unhappy. Which means all of you should be deeply concerned about your futures here. He pulled up a presentation on the screen, slide after slide of declining metrics and missed targets. For the next 45 minutes, he systematically dismantled each executive's performance, pointing out failures real and imagined, accepting no explanations, dismissing all context. When the chief operating officer tried to explain that supply chain disruptions were industry-wide, Robin cut him off mid-sentence. I don't care about industry-wide problems. I care about Titan Global problems. And the problem I'm seeing is leadership that makes excuses instead of results. You have 2 weeks to show measurable improvement, or I'll find people who can. The meeting ended in tense silence. The executives filed out, each avoiding eye contact with the others, each calculating their own survival odds. Robin returned to his office, already moving to his next target. He called the head of sales, the head of marketing, the head of product development. One by one, he delivered the same message. Improve immediately or face consequences. By 5 p.m., the executive floor was nearly empty. Most employees had left early, wanting to escape the oppressive atmosphere. Only a few remained, people working late to demonstrate dedication, or people too afraid to leave while Robin was still in the building. Anna Johnson arrived at 5 p.m. for her evening shift, clocking in at the service elevator time clock. She'd picked up extra evening shifts over the past month, using the additional income to fund her startup venture. The doubled workload was exhausting, but necessary. Every dollar she saved brought her closer to the moment when she could leave Titan Global forever. She retrieved her cart from the storage closet and began her routine. The executive floor was quieter than usual for this time of evening. Normally, at least a dozen people would still be working, but tonight she counted only 4 occupied offices. Something had happened today, some shift in the usual patterns. She could feel it in the atmosphere, the way prey animals sense a predator nearby. She moved through the corridors, emptying trash bins, vacuuming the open areas, wiping down surfaces. In Robin's office, she noticed unusual disarray. His desk, normally organized with military precision, was scattered with documents. An empty glass sat beside his computer, smelling faintly of alcohol. His chair was pushed back at an angle, as though he'd left in a hurry. The stress was visible even in the physical space, the careful control he usually maintained now fraying at the edges. Anna cleaned methodically, not touching the documents but unable to avoid seeing them. Performance reports. Termination recommendations. A handwritten note in Robin's aggressive scrawl. Cut costs 20% across all departments. No exceptions. She moved on to the conference room, pushing her cart quietly, beginning to wipe down the long table. The room was dim, lit only by the ambient light from the corridor. She was halfway through when she heard a voice from Robin's office. The door was partially open, and sound carried clearly in the empty building. Robin was on the phone, his voice sharp with frustration. "I don't care about the testing timeline, Derek. The board wants revenue growth this quarter, and that product launch is our best option. Push it through approval." A pause. Anna continued wiping the table, moving slowly, her hands steady even as her attention focused completely on the conversation. "No, we don't have time for another round of safety testing. The preliminary results were acceptable. That's good enough." Another pause. Longer this time. "Listen to me very carefully. You can either get this product to market by the deadline, or you can update your resume. Those are your options. Which one are you choosing?" Anna's hands stopped moving. She stood perfectly still, processing what she'd just heard. Robin Stark was ordering someone to skip safety testing, to release a product that hadn't been properly vetted, to potentially put consumers at risk to meet quarterly projections. It wasn't just unethical. Depending on what product they were discussing, it could be criminal. She resumed cleaning, her movements deliberate, giving no indication that she'd heard anything unusual. She finished the conference room and moved on to the break room, filing the information away in her mind alongside all the other things she'd observed over 3 years. Another piece of evidence that Robin Stark cared more about his own success than about doing the right thing. By 7 p.m., Anna was nearly finished with her shift. She was in the corridor, wiping down a section of glass wall, when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see Robin Stark emerging from his office, his suit jacket off, his tie loosened, his hair slightly disheveled. He was carrying the glass from his desk, presumably heading to the break room for a refill. He stopped when he saw her, and for the first time in 3 years, he really looked at her. Not past her. Not through her. At her. But there was no recognition in his gaze, no acknowledgement of her as a person. Instead, his eyes were calculating, cold, searching for something to focus his frustration on. "You're still here," he said. "It wasn't a question. It was an accusation." "Yes, sir," Anna replied calmly. "I'm on the evening shift. I'll be finished in about 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Robin stepped closer, his voice sharp with suspicion. "You've been here for 2 hours. How does it take 2 hours to clean an office floor?" "I clean all the executive offices, the conference rooms, the break room, and the corridors," Anna explained, her tone professional and neutral. "It's part of my regular duties." Regular duties. Robin set his glass down on a nearby desk with enough force that Anna heard the crystal ring. "And what exactly are these regular duties? Because from where I'm standing, I see a lot of time spent and not much to show for it." Anna felt something shift in the air, a pressure building like static electricity before a lightning strike. "I follow the cleaning checklist provided by facilities management, sir. If there's a specific concern, I'm happy to address it." But Robin didn't want her to address anything. He wanted a target. He wanted someone to absorb the anger and frustration he'd been carrying since the board meeting, someone who couldn't fight back, someone whose pain would cost him nothing. He walked slowly around her, examining the corridor with exaggerated scrutiny. "This window has a streak." He pointed at a section of glass that was perfectly clean. "And there's dust on this ledge." He ran a finger along a surface Anna had wiped 15 minutes earlier. "Is this the standard of work Titan Global is paying for?" "I'll re-clean both areas immediately, sir." Anna reached for her cart, but Robin stepped in front of it. "I'm not finished." His voice was rising now, projecting down the corridor. "You know what I think. I think you're taking advantage. Dragging out simple tasks. Collecting a paycheck for work that any competent person could complete in half the time." From down the corridor, a door opened. Harold Finch emerged from his office, drawn by the raised voice. He stood in his doorway, watching. A minute later, another door opened. Then another. Junior executives and assistants, appearing like witnesses to an accident, forming a loose audience in the corridor. Robin saw them and something changed in his demeanor. He was performing now, using Anna as a prop in a demonstration of his power. If he couldn't control the board, couldn't control the stock price, couldn't control the forces that threatened his position, he could at least control this. He could at least remind everyone who watched that he was still the one with power here. In fact, Robin continued, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear, I'm questioning whether you should be working here at all, whether you're competent to handle even basic responsibilities. Anna stood motionless, her hands at her sides, her expression calm. She didn't argue, didn't defend herself, didn't give him the reaction he wanted. And her composure, her refusal to break, only made him angrier. The audience in the corridor grew. 6 people now. 7. They watched with a mixture of discomfort and fascination, knowing they should intervene but also knowing that intervening would mark them as Robin's next target. Robin stepped closer to Anna, invading her personal space, using his height advantage to loom over her. His eyes were cold, calculating, searching for the exact words that would finally crack her composure. And in that moment, watching him, Anna realized something. This wasn't just about today's bad mood or today's board meeting. This was who Robin Stark fundamentally was. A man who maintained his sense of power by diminishing others, who built himself up by tearing people down, who saw cruelty not as a weakness but as a management tool. She'd watched him for 3 years. She'd been invisible in his presence. And now, finally visible, she understood that visibility meant becoming his target. There was no way to satisfy him, no perfect answer that would end this confrontation peacefully. He wanted blood. He wanted surrender. He wanted her to break. The question was whether she would give him what he wanted. Robin opened his mouth to speak again, his expression suggesting he'd found whatever words he was searching for. Anna felt the attention of everyone in the corridor focused on this moment, felt the weight of all the invisible humiliations of the past 3 years pressing down on her shoulders. And she remained standing, calm and composed, waiting for whatever would come next. Because she knew something Robin didn't. In less than 48 hours, she wouldn't be the one who needed to worry about her position. She wouldn't be the one whose power was threatened. She wouldn't be the one facing consequences. But Robin Stark would be. Robin Stark had found his target, and he wasn't finished. Do you understand what I'm saying? He asked, his voice rising with each word, pitched now for the growing audience in the corridor. He spoke slowly, deliberately, as though addressing someone intellectually incapable of processing normal speech. Or do I need to use smaller words? Anna remained still, her hands clasped loosely in front of her, her expression unchanged. The water bottle she'd been holding when Robin first confronted her sat forgotten on her cleaning cart. Her blue work uniform showed no wrinkles despite the long shift. Her posture was straight, composed, giving no indication that his words affected her at all. I understand perfectly, sir, she said quietly. Do you? Robin stepped closer, his face now inches from hers, his breath carrying the sharp scent of scotch. Because from where I'm standing, you don't seem to understand much of anything. You don't understand how to do your job efficiently. You don't understand that this company has standards. You don't understand that people like you should be grateful for any employment at all. People like you. The words hung in the air, their implication clear to everyone listening. Down the corridor, 9 people now watched in silence. Melissa Park stood in the doorway of her small office adjacent to Robin's, her hand still on the doorframe, her face troubled but her feet not moving. Harold Finch leaned against his doorway, arms crossed, his expression uncomfortable but passive. 3 junior executives clustered together near the break room, whispering to each other behind raised hands. I'm grateful for the opportunity to work here, sir, Anna said, her voice level and professional. She didn't defend herself beyond that simple statement. Didn't argue. Didn't explain. Her calm was absolute, almost eerie in its completeness. And that calm drove Robin to greater fury. He wanted her to break. Wanted to see tears, hear begging, witness the collapse of dignity that would prove his power was real and absolute. But Anna simply stood there, looking at him with those dark brown eyes that showed nothing but a quiet, patient endurance. Grateful, Robin repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. You know what I think? I think you're lazy. I think you drag out simple tasks because you know you're not capable of anything more demanding. I think you're incompetent, slow, and barely qualified for even this menial position. He gestured at her cart dismissively, at the cleaning supplies, at everything she represented in his worldview. This is the absolute lowest level of employment in this building. The bottom rung. And somehow, even at this level, you can't meet basic standards. What does that say about you? Anna didn't answer. The question was rhetorical, designed not to elicit response but to inflict pain. She understood the distinction. She'd spent 3 years learning the language of corporate cruelty, the ways powerful people used words as weapons against those who couldn't fight back. Robin turned to his audience, playing to them now, feeding off their attention. I've been too patient, too understanding. I've overlooked substandard work because I believed in giving people chances. But there comes a time when you have to acknowledge that some people simply aren't capable of meeting expectations. He turned back to Anna, his voice taking on a tone of theatrical authority. You're a perfect example of why this company needs to maintain higher standards. Why we can't afford to carry people who don't pull their weight. One of the junior executives in the corridor laughed nervously, a sound quickly suppressed. But Robin had heard it, and it encouraged him. He was winning. He was demonstrating his dominance. He was reminding everyone watching that he controlled their fates just as completely as he controlled Anna's. You want to know what I see when I look at you? Robin continued, his voice rising. I see someone who's never had to work hard for anything. Someone who expects the world to accommodate their inadequacies. Someone who thinks showing up is the same as performing. The accusations were absurd, built on assumptions that bore no relationship to reality. Anna had worked multiple jobs for years, had put herself through community college while surviving on 4 hours of sleep, had built a revolutionary technology platform in the gaps between physical labor. But Robin knew nothing of this because he'd never bothered to see her as a person with a story, with capabilities, with a life beyond the function she performed in his building. Nothing to say? Robin pressed, stepping even closer, using his height and proximity as intimidation. No defense. No excuses. No, sir, Anna said simply. Her refusal to engage, to provide the conflict he craved, pushed him past some internal threshold. The anger in his face shifted, hardened into something colder and more calculated. He glanced back toward his office, and his eyes fell on something that sparked an idea. A cruel, perfect idea that would finally break this infuriating composure. On the small table just inside his office door sat a decorative metal bucket, stainless steel with a brushed finish, the kind of vessel that held bottled water and ice during important meetings. It was still half full from this afternoon's session with the board. Condensation beaded on its exterior surface. Ice cubes floated in water that was only a few degrees above freezing. Robin walked to his office and retrieved the bucket. Water sloshed inside it, ice clinking against metal with a sound like wind chimes. He carried it back to where Anna stood, and the corridor went absolutely silent. The watching employees sensed that something terrible was about to happen but remained frozen in place, unable to intervene, unwilling to make themselves the next target. Robin held the bucket with both hands, feeling its weight, its coldness. He looked at Anna's face, searching one final time for fear or pleading. Found neither. Only that same quiet composure that had infuriated him throughout this entire confrontation. You're fired, he announced, his voice carrying the theatrical authority of someone who'd rehearsed this moment in his mind. Effective immediately. You're incompetent, you're slow, and frankly, this company deserves better than whatever it is you think you've been providing. Anna's expression didn't change. She simply stood there, waiting. Not for mercy, Robin realized with a flash of anger. Not hoping he'd change his mind. Just waiting for him to finish so she could leave. That realization, that she wasn't afraid of him, that his power over her employment meant nothing to her dignity, pushed him over the final edge. Robin lifted the bucket and poured its contents over Anna's head. The shock of it stole her breath. Freezing water cascaded over her hair, her face, her shoulders. It soaked through her blue work uniform in seconds, the the fabric darkening and clinging to her skin. Ice water ran down her back, her arms, pooled in her shoes. Ice cubes bounced off her shoulders and scattered across the polished floor, skittering away in different directions with tiny clicking sounds. Water dripped from her hair, her chin, her fingertips, forming a growing puddle around her feet. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, the corridor was frozen in absolute silence. The overhead lights hummed. Somewhere distant, an elevator chimed. But on the 34th floor, no one moved, no one breathed, everyone trapped in the horrified realization of what they'd just witnessed. Then someone laughed. The sound came from near the break room, a nervous bark quickly suppressed but not quickly enough. It broke the spell. Another person laughed, this sound more performative, designed to align with power, to signal to Robin that they approved, that they were on his side. Then another laugh, and another. Within seconds, the corridor filled with laughter. Some of it was genuine, the dark amusement of people watching someone else's humiliation. Some was forced, the calculated response of employees demonstrating loyalty to the person who controlled their paychecks. But all of it participated in Anna's degradation. All of it said she deserved this. All of it confirmed that Robin Stark had successfully reasserted his dominance. Robin stood holding the empty bucket, a satisfied smirk spreading across his face. He looked around at his audience, accepting their laughter like applause, feeling his power confirmed. The board might question him, the stock might decline, forces beyond his control might threaten his position, but here, in this moment, he was unquestionably in command. Anna stood motionless in the center of her own humiliation, water still dripping, ice cubes scattered around her feet like fallen stars. Her uniform clung to her body. Her hair was plastered to her skull. Water ran into her eyes, and she blinked it away slowly, not bothering to wipe her face. And then she looked directly at Robin Stark. Her eyes, which had remained carefully neutral through 3 years of invisible existence, now held something entirely different. Not rage, though she would have been justified. Not hatred, though that too would have been understandable. Something colder and infinitely more dangerous. Certainty. She knew something he didn't. She understood something he couldn't see. And in that moment, looking at his smug face, hearing the laughter echoing off the glass walls, feeling the ice water soaking through to her skin, Anna Johnson made a decision. She would teach Robin Stark a lesson he would never forget. Not through anger or revenge, but through something far more devastating, truth. The truth of who she was. The truth of what she'd built. The truth that worth wasn't determined by position or the cruelty of powerful men, but by capability, intelligence, and unshakable self-knowledge. Without a word, Anna turned and walked toward the elevators. Each step left a wet footprint on the polished floor. Water dripped from her uniform, from her hair, trailing behind her like breadcrumbs. The laughter followed her, bouncing off the hard surfaces, multiplying in the acoustics of the corridor. She didn't hurry, didn't run, didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her flee. She walked with her back straight and her head high, moving with the same quiet dignity she'd brought to 3 years of invisible work. The elevator was 20 feet away, then 10. Then she was there, pressing the button, waiting. The laughter continued behind her. She heard Robin's voice saying something to his audience, heard fresh laughter in response. The elevator doors opened with a gentle chime. Anna stepped inside and turned to face the corridor one final time. She looked at each face in the watching crowd. Melissa, still in her doorway, no longer laughing, her expression troubled. Harold, uncomfortable but having made no move to intervene. The junior executives, some still chuckling, others now quiet as they met her gaze. And Robin, standing in the center of the corridor holding an empty bucket, wearing the satisfied expression of someone who believed he'd won. The elevator doors slid closed, and Anna disappeared from their sight. The corridor fell quiet. The performance was over. The audience, suddenly aware of what they'd witnessed and participated in, began to disperse. Some returned to their offices quickly, eager to escape the lingering discomfort. Others moved more slowly, processing, questioning what they'd just seen and their role in it. "Well," Robin said to no one in particular, his voice carrying forced joviality, "that's how you handle people who don't respect this company's standards." A few people laughed dutifully. Most didn't. Robin didn't seem to notice the difference. He handed the empty bucket to Melissa. "Clean up this water before someone slips." Melissa took the bucket without speaking, her lips pressed into a thin line. Robin returned to his office, already moving on, already forgetting, the incident filed away as just another example of effective management. Melissa stood in the corridor holding the bucket, looking at the puddles and scattered ice cubes, the wet footprints leading to the elevator. Around her, the floor slowly returned to its normal rhythms. Doors closed. Computers hummed. The building continued its ordinary existence as though nothing extraordinary had occurred. But Melissa knew better. She'd worked for Robin long enough to recognize the particular quality of cruelty he'd displayed tonight. She'd seen him berate employees before, had witnessed his anger and his arrogance. But this was different. This wasn't just cruelty. This was dehumanization, public and deliberate, and designed to break someone completely. And the woman, Anna, the janitor who'd always been professional and quiet and caused no problems, had stood there and taken it without breaking. Had walked away with more dignity than Robin would ever possess. Melissa retrieved a mop from the janitor's closet and began cleaning up the water, the ice, the physical evidence of what had happened. But she couldn't clean up the memory, couldn't erase the image of Anna standing motionless while ice water soaked through her clothes, couldn't forget the sound of her own silence when she should have spoken up. 20 minutes later, the corridor was dry and empty. The 34th floor was quiet except for the muted sounds of Robin on the phone in his office, already deep in conversation about tomorrow's meetings, about quarterly projections, about the countless concerns of a man who'd already forgotten what he'd done. But Anna Johnson hadn't forgotten. And unlike Robin Stark, she never would. The elevator had carried her down to the ground floor. She'd walked through the lobby past the security desk, the guard looking up in surprise at her soaked uniform, opening his mouth to ask if she was okay. She'd smiled at him, a small sad smile, and kept walking out into the evening air. The night was cold. The water in her clothes made it colder. But Anna felt nothing but a crystalline clarity, a perfect understanding of what needed to happen next. Tomorrow, everything would change. Robin Stark had humiliated her in front of witnesses, had treated her as less than human, had used his power to inflict cruelty because he could. And now, Anna would show him what real power looked like. Not the power to harm people weaker than yourself. The power to transform everything. To take the worst moment of your life and turn it into the catalyst for justice. Robin thought he'd won tonight. He'd reasserted his dominance, reminded everyone of his control, destroyed someone he considered insignificant. He had no idea what was coming. No idea that his greatest moment of cruelty would become his worst mistake. Anna drove through the city streets with water still dripping from her hair onto the cloth seat of her 11-year-old sedan. The heater blasted at full strength, but she barely felt it. Her uniform clung to her skin, cold and uncomfortable, but she didn't go home to change. Home was in the opposite direction, a small studio apartment she could afford on a janitor's salary. That wasn't where she needed to be tonight. She drove east, away from the gleaming downtown towers, through neighborhoods where the streetlights were spaced farther apart and the buildings showed their age without shame. The warehouse district had been industrial once, before manufacturing moved overseas and left behind shells of concrete and brick. Some buildings remained empty, windows broken, graffiti layering the walls. Others had been converted, repurposed, transformed into something new. Anna pulled into a parking lot behind a 4-story brick building with tall windows and a fading painted sign advertising a textile company that had closed 30 years ago. She climbed the exterior stairs to the 3rd floor, her wet shoes squeaking on the metal treads, and unlocked the heavy door with a key she kept on the same ring as her car key and apartment key. The space opened before her, exposed brick walls, concrete floors painted gray, high ceilings crisscrossed with ductwork and electrical conduit. Fluorescent lights hung on chains, casting harsh white illumination across rows of mismatched desks and tables. Perhaps 30 people worked here during peak hours, though tonight only 6 remained, hunched over laptops, sketching on tablets, having quiet conversations in corners. Anna walked past them to the far side of the space, where a row of lockers salvaged from a closed gym lined the wall. She opened number 17 and retrieved the dry clothes she kept there. Jeans, a sweatshirt, clean socks. She changed in the small bathroom, leaving her soaked uniform draped over the sink to dry, and emerged feeling slightly more human but no less angry. Her desk was in the corner, positioned to catch natural light from the tall windows during daytime hours. A folding table she'd bought second-hand formed the work surface. A salvaged office chair provided seating. But the technology on that table was anything but second-hand. 2 large monitors connected to a powerful laptop. A mechanical keyboard worn smooth from thousands of hours of use. A tablet for sketching interfaces and workflows. And behind the monitors, taking up the entire wall space, 3 whiteboards covered in her handwriting. The boards told a story in algorithms, equations, and flowcharts. Supply chain optimization models. Machine learning architectures. Data integration frameworks. Revenue projections. Market analysis. Patent filing timelines. 3 years of work compressed into visual representations that would mean nothing to Robin Stark but represented something that could transform entire industries. Anna sat down and woke her laptop. The screen displayed lines of code, the foundation of something she'd built through thousands of hours of work that no one at Titan Global could imagine her capable of. She'd named it Nexus AI, a platform that used artificial intelligence to predict and prevent supply chain disruptions before they occurred. The concept had come to her during her first month at Titan Global, listening to executives complain about delayed shipments, inventory shortages, communication failures between suppliers and logistics teams. She'd realized they were describing symptoms of a problem that could be solved algorithmically. Supply chains generated massive amounts of data, but no one was using that data intelligently. No one was applying machine learning to predict disruptions, to identify vulnerabilities, to optimize routes and inventory in real time. So Anna had started building it, teaching herself advanced programming through online courses, writing code on her phone during lunch breaks, testing algorithms with sample datasets, slowly, impossibly, creating something revolutionary. Anna! A voice pulled her from her thoughts. She looked up to see Dev Kapoor approaching, concern visible on his face. Are you okay? You're soaking wet. Dev was 34, rail-thin, with dark circles under his eyes from too many late nights coding. He'd been a software engineer at a promising startup that had burned through its funding and collapsed. When Anna had recruited him 8 months ago, he'd been driving for a rideshare service and wondering if he'd ever build anything meaningful again. I'm fine, Anna said, though her voice suggested otherwise. Just a long day. That's an understatement. Lisa Ramirez appeared from behind a partition, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Anna. You look like you've been through hell. Lisa was 41, a data scientist with a PhD from Stanford who'd left a secure corporate position because she was tired of building models that never got implemented. She'd taken a massive pay cut to join Nexus AI, believing in the vision when she had no rational reason to. Her expertise in machine learning had transformed Anna's concept from promising to revolutionary. Where's James? Anna asked, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. Right here. James Wong emerged from under a desk where he'd apparently been dealing with cable management. At 22, he was the youngest of the team, a programming prodigy who'd dropped out of college after 1 semester because he'd already learned everything they were teaching. He joined Nexus AI 6 months ago and had written more functional code than anyone else on the team. The 3 of them gathered around Anna's desk, and she realized they could tell something was wrong. They'd worked together long enough to read each other's moods, to know when someone was struggling. What happened? Dev asked quietly. Anna took a breath, then told them. About Robin Stark's bad day. About the confrontation in the corridor. About the accusations, the cruelty, the bucket of ice water poured over her head while people laughed. She told it calmly, factually, but her hands shook slightly as she held the coffee cup. The celebration that had been building in the space died instantly. Dev's face went dark with anger. Lisa stood up, pacing, her jaw tight. James looked stricken, his youth showing in his inability to process such casual cruelty. That's assault, Lisa said. We should call the police. File charges. Get a lawyer. I want to go to the media, James added, his voice shaking. Put his face everywhere. Show everyone what kind of person he is. No, Anna said quietly. We're not doing that. Why not? Dev demanded. He humiliated you. He assaulted you. He deserves to face consequences. He will, Anna said, and something in her voice made all three of them stop and look at her. But not the way you're thinking. Her phone rang before anyone could respond. Anna looked at the screen. Sandra Liu, Tech Venture Capital. Her hands were steadier now as she answered. Sandra. Good evening. Diana, I hope I'm not calling too late. Sandra's voice carried barely contained excitement. I wanted to reach you before tomorrow's official announcement. The partners voted this afternoon. We're in. Series C funding, $120 million, valuing Nexus AI at $1.2 billion. The warehouse space seemed to tilt slightly. Anna closed her eyes, letting the information settle. $1.2 billion. She owned 65%. The mathematics were simple and overwhelming. By this time tomorrow, she would officially be a billionaire. Diana? Are you there? I'm here, Anna said, her voice steady despite everything. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for believing in this. Thank you for building something extraordinary. We'll want to announce publicly tomorrow morning. Generate media interest. I'm thinking 9 a.m. at our offices. We'll have the business press there, maybe some television crews. Show the world what Nexus AI can do. Anna thought about Robin Stark, about the satisfaction on his face as he poured ice water over her head. About 3 years of being invisible, dismissed, treated as insignificant. About the irony of timing so perfect it seemed scripted. Sandra, I have a request. Can we change the location? Change it. To where? Titan Global Enterprises. The lobby. It's where I've been working for the past 3 years as a janitor while building this company. It would make a compelling story. There was a pause. Anna could almost hear Sandra's mind working, processing the narrative implications, recognizing the perfect symbolism. That's brilliant, Sandra said finally. Absolutely brilliant. The underdog story practically writes itself. Let me make some calls. I'll coordinate with the building management and get back to you within an hour. Anna ended the call and looked at her team. They stared back at her with expressions ranging from confusion to dawning understanding. You're going back there? Dev asked. Tomorrow morning? Not as a janitor, Anna replied. As the CEO of a billion-dollar company. As someone they should have seen but didn't. As someone who's going to teach Robin Stark the most expensive lesson of his life. Lisa's expression shifted from anger to something like awe. You're going to announce the funding at his building. In front of him. In front of everyone who laughed, Anna confirmed. Everyone who watched and did nothing. Everyone who assumed I was insignificant because I cleaned floors. James grinned suddenly, the expression fierce. That's savage. That's absolutely savage. It's justice, Anna corrected. Not revenge. There's a difference. Her phone rang again. Then again. For the next 2 hours, Anna made and received calls. Her lawyer, reviewing the terms and ensuring everything was legitimate. Her publicist, coordinating media outreach for maximum impact. Journalists she'd cultivated relationships with over the past month, feeding them details of the story, ensuring they'd be present tomorrow. Building management at Titan Global, confirming the lobby was available and permits were in order. Dev, Lisa, and James worked around her, preparing the presentation materials, updating the company website, drafting press releases. The warehouse space filled with focused energy, everyone understanding they were participating in something significant. By midnight, everything was in place. The press conference would begin at 9 a.m. in the Titan Global lobby. Major business networks would be there. Print journalists. Online media. Sandra Liu would announce the funding. Anna would present the technology. And Robin Stark, arriving for his usual 7:30 a.m. start time, would walk into a situation he couldn't control, couldn't dismiss, couldn't make disappear. Anna sat back in her chair, exhausted but clear-minded. Her team had finally left, heading home to sleep before tomorrow's early start. The warehouse was quiet except for the ambient sounds of the building settling, pipes creaking, the distant hum of traffic. She thought about the woman who'd clocked in at 5 a.m. this morning, invisible and dismissed. She thought about the woman who'd stood motionless while ice water soaked through her clothes and people laughed. She thought about 3 years of being treated as insignificant by people who'd never bothered to see past her uniform. And she thought about the woman she'd be tomorrow morning. Diana Johnson, CEO and founder of Nexus AI, a billionaire, someone impossible to ignore or dismiss or treat as less than fully human. The transformation wouldn't change who she was. It would simply reveal who she'd always been to people who'd never bothered to look. Anna smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow, Robin Stark would learn what it meant to underestimate someone. Tomorrow, everyone who'd laughed would understand their mistake. Tomorrow, the invisible woman would become impossible to ignore. And the entire world would watch as the janitor became a billionaire and left everyone, especially Robin Stark, absolutely speechless. She gathered her things, locked up the workspace, and drove home through empty streets. She needed sleep. Tomorrow would be the most important day of her life, the day when everything she'd built in secret would become public, undeniable, transformative. Robin Stark had poured ice water over her head, thinking he'd broken her, thinking he'd won. He had no idea what was coming. Morning arrived at Titan Global Enterprises the way it always did, with the methodical rhythm of corporate routine. Employees began filtering into the building at 7:45 a.m., carrying branded coffee cups and breakfast sandwiches, swiping security badges at the turnstiles, riding elevators to their respective floors. Conversations were muted, professional, focused on weekend recaps and upcoming meetings. The building hummed with the quiet energy of people settling into another day of work. On the 34th floor, the morning unfolded with familiar patterns. Computers powered on. Phones began ringing. The espresso machine in the break room hissed and steamed as junior executives prepared their caffeine for the day ahead. By all appearances, this was a day like any other. But beneath the surface normalcy, something else circulated. A story, whispered in break rooms, shared in hushed tones near cubicles, retold with varying degrees of accuracy and embellishment. The story of what had happened last night in the executive corridor. "I heard he dumped an entire bucket of ice water on her head," someone said near the coffee machine. "She was soaking wet. Just stood there and took it. Robin was on fire last night. I've never seen him that angry. Did you see her face? She didn't even react. Just walked away like nothing happened." The reactions varied. Some people found it entertaining, a demonstration of Robin's no-nonsense leadership style. Others were uncomfortable, troubled by what they'd witnessed but unsure what to do with that discomfort. A few felt genuine shame for their participation, for their laughter, for their silence. But no one spoke up. No one filed a complaint. No one challenged the narrative that what had happened was somehow acceptable. Robin Stark arrived at 7:28 a.m., 2 minutes earlier than his usual time, already on his phone before he'd cleared the elevator. His voice carried across the floor, sharp and demanding, as he spoke to someone about quarterly projections. He strode to his office without acknowledging anyone, closed the door, and continued his call visible through the glass walls, pacing behind his desk with aggressive energy. Melissa Park had arrived at 7 a.m., as she always did, preparing for Robin's day before he arrived. She'd organized his calendar, prepared briefing documents for his morning meetings, ensured his office was exactly as he preferred it. But this morning, her usual efficiency was compromised by an uncomfortable weight in her chest. She'd barely slept. Every time she'd closed her eyes, she'd seen Anna standing in the corridor, water dripping from her uniform, ice cubes scattered at her feet. She'd heard the laughter, including her own silence, which felt like participation. She'd felt the shame of watching something cruel happen and doing nothing to stop it. Melissa had worked for Robin for 5 years. She'd witnessed his temper, his impatience, his tendency to berate people he considered incompetent. She'd made excuses for him, rationalized his behavior as the pressure of leadership, the demands of running a major corporation. But last night had been different. Last night had crossed some line she couldn't quite articulate but felt viscerally. She thought about Anna, the quiet janitor who'd always been professional in their brief interactions. Who'd once returned a USB drive Melissa had dropped, tracking her down to ensure it was safely returned. Who'd never complained, never caused problems, never done anything to deserve what had happened to her. Melissa considered calling HR, filing an incident report, creating an official record of what had occurred. But she knew exactly what would happen. Robin would deny any wrongdoing. The witnesses would support him or claim not to remember clearly. And Melissa would be marked as disloyal, a troublemaker, someone who didn't understand how things worked. She'd lose her job. Her career would suffer. And nothing would change. So instead, she did what she'd always done, her job. She reviewed Robin's schedule, confirmed his meetings, prepared his materials. She buried her discomfort beneath layers of professional competence and tried not to think about the woman who'd walked away with more dignity than anyone else in that corridor had shown. At 8:30 a.m., Melissa's phone rang. The caller ID showed building security. "Ms. Park, this is Dennis at the main security desk. We have a situation developing that might affect your floor." "What kind of situation?" "There's a press conference being set up in the main lobby. Media crews, cameras, the works. Legitimate credentials, all the permits in order, but it wasn't scheduled through Titan Global. Building management approved it independently." Melissa felt a flutter of concern. What company is holding the conference? "Something called Nexus AI. They're setting up now. Looks like a major announcement. I wanted to give you a heads up in case Mr. Stark needs to know." "Thank you, Dennis. I'll inform him immediately." Melissa hung up and walked to Robin's office. He was off the phone now, reviewing something on his computer, his expression focused and irritated. She knocked once and entered without waiting for permission. "There's a press conference being set up in the lobby. A company called Nexus AI. Building management approved it, but they didn't coordinate with us." Robin looked up sharply. "What? Who authorized media access to this building?" "The building management company. They own the lobby space and apparently rented it out. Security says all the proper permits were obtained." "Nexus AI." Robin's eyes narrowed. Never heard of them. What are they announcing? Security didn't have details. Just that it appears to be a major event. Multiple news crews. Robin's irritation shifted into something else. He didn't like surprises, especially not in his own building. But he was also curious, already calculating whether this represented an opportunity. "Get me everything we have on this company, and find out what they're announcing. I'll reach out to our strategic intelligence team immediately." Melissa returned to her desk and made the necessary calls. Within 10 minutes, a junior analyst from the intelligence team appeared with a hastily compiled brief. Melissa scanned it quickly, her concern deepening with each line, then carried it to Robin's office. "Nexus AI," she said, handing him the document. "Founded 3 years ago. Artificial intelligence platform for supply chain optimization. They've been operating in stealth mode, very secretive. Today's announcement is reportedly about a major funding round led by tech venture capital." Robin read quickly, his business instincts immediately engaged. Tech venture? They're top tier. They don't fund garbage. He continued reading. Estimated valuation over $1 billion. Revolutionary technology. Predictive disruption prevention. He looked up. This is exactly the kind of company we should be talking to. Why haven't we heard of them? They've been deliberately low profile. No public announcements until now. Get me a meeting with their CEO. Today, if possible. If they're launching in our building, we might as well make the most of it. Robin stood, straightening his tie. "I'm going down to see this announcement. Have Harold and Jennifer join me. This could be a partnership opportunity." Word spread quickly through the 34th floor. A billion-dollar company was launching downstairs. People began migrating toward the elevators, finding excuses to go to the lobby, curious to witness something newsworthy happening in their building. The same employees who'd laughed last night now saw this as entertainment of a different sort, a break from routine, something interesting to witness. In the lobby, the transformation was nearly complete. A small stage had been assembled near the main entrance, professional and polished. 3 television cameras were positioned at strategic angles, their crews checking lighting and sound. Print journalists clustered in groups, reviewing notes, checking phones. A banner had been unfurled behind the podium, sleek and modern, Nexus AI, revolutionizing global commerce. The lobby filled with spectators. Titan Global employees mixed with people from other companies in the building, all drawn by curiosity and the promise of witnessing something significant. Robin Stark arrived with his senior executives, positioning himself where he'd be visible, where networking opportunities might arise. He scanned the crowd, noting which media outlets were represented, calculating the level of attention this announcement would receive. Harold Finch stood beside him, also reading the hastily prepared brief. Supply chain AI. That's a massive market. If their technology actually works, they could capture serious market share. We need to talk to them, Robin said. See if there's acquisition potential or at least a partnership. This is our building. That gives us an advantage. At 8:55 a.m., a subtle shift in energy rippled through the lobby. People near the entrance turned, attention focusing on something outside. Robin craned his neck to see what had captured their interest. 3 black SUVs had pulled up at the curb, sleek and expensive, the kind of vehicles that announced importance. The rear door of the middle SUV opened, and a woman emerged. She wore a navy suit, perfectly tailored, the kind of garment that cost thousands and fit like it had been made specifically for her body. Her natural hair was styled professionally, framing her face with intentional elegance. She carried herself with absolute confidence, the bearing of someone who knew exactly who she was and what she was worth. Even from a distance, she commanded attention. Behind her, 3 other people emerged. 2 men and a woman, all dressed professionally, all moving with the coordinated purpose of a team that had worked together extensively. From the 3rd SUV, several more people appeared, including an older woman in an expensive suit who Robin recognized from photographs. Sandra Liu, a senior partner at Tech Venture Capital. The group moved toward the entrance, and Robin felt a flicker of interest. The woman in the navy suit was clearly the CEO, the founder, the person this entire event centered around. He made a mental note to introduce himself, to position Titan Global as a potential partner, to leverage this unexpected opportunity. The woman and her entourage entered the lobby, and the assembled journalists turned toward them like flowers following the sun. Camera crews adjusted their positions. Photographers raised their equipment. The energy in the space intensified, everyone sensing they were about to witness something significant. Robin watched the woman approach the stage, and something nagged at the edge of his awareness. Something familiar about her bearing, her face, though he couldn't quite place it. Perhaps he'd seen her at an industry conference or read about her in business publications. The tech world was small enough that faces became familiar even without direct interaction. The woman reached the stage and turned to face the assembled crowd, her expression calm and professional. Sandra Liu joined her, along with the 3 team members and what appeared to be legal counsel. They arranged themselves in a line, the woman in the navy suit at the center, clearly the focal point of whatever announcement was about to unfold. The lobby fell quiet. Cameras rolled. Journalists raised their recording devices. Robin Stark stood in the crowd, positioned perfectly to network afterward, already planning his approach, already calculating the angles. And the woman on the stage, backlit by the morning sun streaming through the lobby windows, looked directly at him across the assembled crowd. Their eyes met for a single moment, and Robin saw something in her expression he couldn't quite interpret. Not nervousness. Not uncertainty. Something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. But that was impossible. He'd never met this woman in his life. The woman turned her attention to the broader crowd, and the moment passed. Robin dismissed it as his imagination, his mind searching for patterns where none existed. He focused on what mattered, the opportunity this announcement represented, the potential for Titan Global to benefit from proximity to this emerging company. The woman stepped forward to the podium, and the press conference was about to begin. Robin watched with the focused attention of someone always looking for the next advantage, the next opportunity, the next way to demonstrate his value to the board that had questioned him just yesterday. He had no idea that in the next few minutes, his entire world was about to collapse. No idea that the woman on the stage was about to destroy everything he'd built. No idea that his worst mistake was about to become public, permanent, and career-ending. The woman adjusted the microphone, smiled at the assembled crowd, and began to speak. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here." Anna's voice carried clearly through the lobby, amplified by the microphone but needing no enhancement. It was clear, confident, carrying the educated precision of someone comfortable addressing crowds. This was not the quiet voice Robin remembered from their handful of interactions. This was the voice of a leader, someone who commanded attention and respect without demanding it. "My name is Diana Johnson, though most people call me Anna. I'm the founder and CEO of Nexus AI." Robin Stark's world tilted sideways. The woman in the navy suit. The confident CEO standing at the podium. The founder of a billion-dollar company. It was Anna, the janitor. The woman he'd fired last night. The woman he'd humiliated in front of his staff. But that was impossible. His brain refused to process the connection, refused to reconcile the two images. Janitors didn't found technology companies. People who cleaned floors didn't stand on stages with venture capital partners. The woman he dismissed as insignificant couldn't possibly be the same person commanding the attention of major business media. Yet there she was, undeniably, impossibly, speaking with authority about artificial intelligence and supply chain optimization. Robin's hands went cold. His pulse hammered in his ears. Around him, other Titan Global employees were beginning to have the same realization, whispers spreading like fire through dry grass. "That's her. Oh my God, that's the janitor. That's the woman from last night." Anna continued speaking, apparently unaware of or unconcerned by the recognition spreading through the crowd. "For the past 3 years, Nexus AI has been developing breakthrough artificial intelligence technology for supply chain optimization. Our platform uses machine learning to predict disruptions before they occur, allowing companies to prevent problems rather than react to them." Behind her, a screen displayed data visualizations, graphs showing prediction accuracy, client testimonials, market projections. Anna moved through the presentation with practiced ease, explaining complex concepts in accessible language, demonstrating not just technical expertise but business acumen. "Traditional supply chain management is reactive," Anna continued. "Companies respond to disruptions after they happen, losing time and money. Our system analyzes thousands of data points in real time. Weather patterns, political developments, transportation networks, supplier reliability, historical trends. We predict disruptions with 97% accuracy, giving companies time to adjust routes, modify orders, or source from alternative suppliers." She clicked to the next slide, showing case studies from beta testers. One client saved $8 million in the first quarter by preventing inventory shortages. Another reduced delivery delays by 63%. A third identified supplier vulnerabilities that would have cost them their largest contract. The assembled journalists were rapt, taking notes, recording every word. This was exactly the kind of story they loved. Innovative technology, measurable results, massive market potential. Robin watched in growing horror as Anna commanded the room, as cameras focused on her face, as the business world discovered what he'd been too blind to see. "Nexus AI isn't just solving today's problems," Anna said, her voice building with controlled passion. "We're transforming how global commerce operates. We're making supply chains intelligent, adaptive, resilient. And we're just getting started." She stepped back from the podium, and Sandra Liu moved forward to take her place. The older woman exuded Silicon Valley authority, her presence lending credibility to everything Anna had said. "Thank you, Diana. I'm Sandra Liu, senior partner at Tech Venture Capital. We've spent the past month conducting extensive due diligence on Nexus AI, and I can tell you without reservation, this is the most impressive technology we've evaluated in 5 years." Sandra paused for effect, letting the statement land. Tech Venture Capital is proud to announce that we're leading a Series C funding round valuing Nexus AI at $1.2 billion. This represents a $120 million investment in a company we believe will revolutionize global logistics. The lobby erupted. Camera flashes went off like lightning. Journalists shouted questions, trying to be heard over each other. The number hung in the air, impossible to ignore. $1.2 billion. Sandra raised her hand, calling for quiet. Diana Johnson holds 65% equity in Nexus AI, making her the majority shareholder and, as of this morning, officially a billionaire. This is a woman who taught herself to code, who built revolutionary technology while working multiple jobs, who saw a problem everyone else ignored and created a solution that will transform an entire industry. Robin couldn't breathe. The janitor was a billionaire. The woman he'd poured ice water over was worth more than his entire company's market capitalization. More than his net worth. More than everything he'd accumulated in 20 years of climbing the corporate ladder. Around him, Titan Global employees stared at him with expressions ranging from shock to horror to something that looked like satisfaction. They knew what he'd done. They'd witnessed it, participated in it, laughed at it. And now they were watching the consequences unfold in real time. Harold Finch stood 3 feet away, his face ashen. Jennifer Caldwell had her hand over her mouth. The junior executives who'd laughed loudest last night looked sick. And Melissa Park, standing near the back of the crowd, watched with an expression Robin couldn't quite interpret but felt like judgment. A journalist raised her voice above the others. "Ms. Johnson, can you tell us about your background? How did you develop this technology?" Anna returned to the podium, and her smile was genuine warm, nothing like the carefully neutral expression she'd worn while cleaning his office. "I put myself through community college while working 3 jobs. I learned to code from free online courses, studying late at night after my shifts. I saw a problem in logistics that no one was solving and spent 3 years building a solution, 1 line of code at a time." Another journalist jumped in. "Where were you working while you built Nexus AI?" Anna's smile didn't waver, but her eyes found Robin in the crowd and held his gaze for a moment that felt eternal. "I worked as a janitor at Titan Global Enterprises. Right here in this building, actually. The evening shift gave me access to observe how corporate supply chains operate and showed me firsthand where the inefficiencies existed." The murmur that went through the crowd was audible even over the ambient noise of the lobby. Robin felt dozens of eyes turning toward him, felt the weight of attention and judgment and dawning understanding. Anna continued, her voice steady and clear. "Working in that position taught me humility. It showed me how people treat those they consider beneath them. It gave me perspective on what kind of leader I wanted to be." She paused, and though she wasn't looking directly at Robin anymore, everyone knew exactly who she was talking about. Success isn't just about intelligence or education. It's about persistence, vision, and treating every person with respect, regardless of their position or their title. The words landed like physical blows. Robin felt his carefully constructed world cracking, felt his power and authority dissolving like salt in water. He had to do something, had to regain control of this narrative, had to stop this disaster before it consumed him completely. He pushed through the crowd, his movements jerky with panic and rage. People stepped aside, creating a path toward the stage. His voice came out louder than he intended, harsh and desperate. "This is absurd. This is some kind of mistake." The entire lobby went silent. Every camera swiveled to capture him. Every journalist's attention focused on the confrontation unfolding before them. Anna looked at him calmly, waiting, her expression neutral. "You're a janitor," Robin said, hearing the desperation in his own voice but unable to stop. "You worked for me. You cleaned floors. This has to be fraud, some kind of scam." "Mr. Stark." Anna's voice was calm, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "I did work for you. For 3 years. I arrived at 5 in the morning to clean your office before you got there. I emptied your trash, wiped down your desk, made your workspace ready for your day. You walked past me every single morning and never once acknowledged my existence." The cameras captured every word, every expression, every moment of this confrontation. Robin's face burned, but he couldn't retreat now, couldn't back down with everyone watching. "Last night," Anna continued, her voice still steady, "you fired me. You accused me of incompetence, of being lazy, of being barely qualified for the lowest position in your building. And then you poured a bucket of ice water over my head in front of your employees while they laughed." Robin heard gasps from the crowd, saw journalists typing frantically, saw cameras zooming in on his face. This was being recorded. This was being broadcast. This was going to be everywhere by noon. You did it because you could, Anna said. Because you thought I was powerless. Because you've spent your entire career believing that cruelty is a management tool, that humiliating people somehow makes you strong. Because you've never faced consequences for treating human beings as disposable. Robin started, but he had no defense, no explanation that wouldn't make things worse. Anna's expression softened slightly, and somehow that was more devastating than anger would have been. But I don't believe in revenge, Mr. Stark. I believe in transformation. Nexus AI is going to change supply chain management globally. We're going to need partners in various industries, companies that understand value and innovation. Robin felt a flicker of hope. She was offering him a way out, a chance to salvage something from this disaster. Titan Global could be one of those partners, Anna continued. Your company has significant market presence, existing client relationships, infrastructure we could leverage. But here's my condition. The hope died as quickly as it had sparked. You step down as CEO, Anna said clearly, her voice carrying to every corner of the lobby. You undergo training in ethical leadership. You issue a public apology, not just to me, but to every employee you've demeaned, every person you've treated as less than human. And you donate a significant portion of your personal wealth to organizations that support working-class education and job training, giving other people the opportunities you tried to deny me. The lobby was absolutely silent. Robin's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. This couldn't be happening. She couldn't make these demands, couldn't force him to surrender everything he'd built. You have 72 hours to decide, Anna said, her tone final and absolute. Partner with us under these terms, or watch as Nexus AI partners with your competitors and leaves Titan Global behind in an industry we're about to revolutionize. The choice is yours, Mr. Stark. But this time, you're not the one with all the power. She held his gaze for one more moment, then turned back to the assembled press. Thank you all for coming. We'll be happy to take more questions about the technology, the funding, and our plans for growth. Journalists erupted with questions, but Robin didn't hear them. He stood frozen in the middle of the lobby, feeling his career, his reputation, his entire life collapsing around him. The cameras were still recording. The journalists were still watching. His employees surrounded him, their expressions ranging from shock to vindication. And on the stage, Anna Johnson, the janitor he'd humiliated just 16 hours ago, commanded the attention of the business world as a billionaire CEO, as someone who'd built something revolutionary while he dismissed her as insignificant. Robin turned and walked toward the elevator, each step feeling like moving through water. Behind him, he heard Anna's voice answering questions, heard the excitement in the journalists' voices, heard the future being written without him. The elevator doors closed, and Robin saw his reflection in the polished metal, a man who'd just made the most expensive mistake of his life and had been too blind with cruelty to see it coming. By noon, the video was everywhere. Someone had recorded it on their phone. The entire confrontation in the Titan Global corridor, captured in shaky vertical video with surprisingly clear audio. Robin Stark's voice, loud and contemptuous. Anna standing motionless. The bucket being lifted. Ice water cascading over her head. The laughter that followed, echoing off the glass walls. The video appeared first on social media, posted by an anonymous account. Within an hour, it had been shared thousands of times. Within 2 hours, major news outlets had picked it up, embedding it in articles about the morning's press conference. By early afternoon, it dominated every business news cycle and was bleeding into mainstream coverage. The narrative wrote itself, a cold, cruel CEO humiliating a black janitor, only to discover she was a self-made billionaire who'd built a revolutionary company while he dismissed her as insignificant. It was the kind of story that transcended business news, that spoke to larger themes of dignity, perseverance, justice delayed but not denied. Public opinion was swift and brutal. Twitter erupted. Hashtag Justice for Anna trended within hours, followed quickly by hashtag CEO Accountability and hashtag Nexus AI. People shared the video with commentary ranging from outraged to celebratory. Robin Stark's name became synonymous with corporate cruelty. His photo appeared in articles about toxic leadership, workplace bullying, the casual dehumanization that happened when power went unchecked. Anna Johnson became an overnight sensation. Not just for her business success, though that story was compelling enough on its own, but for her composure in the face of humiliation, for her dignity when confronted with cruelty, for her grace in offering Robin a path toward redemption rather than simply destroying him. She was interviewed on cable news, profiled in business magazines, celebrated as an example of resilience and character. The video played on loop across every platform. Robin pouring ice water. Anna standing motionless. The laughter. Each replay drove home the cruelty of the moment, the casual way Robin had treated another human being as disposable, the complicity of everyone who'd watched and laughed. At Titan Global headquarters, the 35th floor boardroom was filled with tension thick enough to choke on. 8 board members sat around the walnut table, their expressions ranging from fury to despair. Gerald Hutchins, the board chairman, stood at the head of the table, his face gray with stress. "The stock is down 18% since this morning," he said, his voice flat. "We've lost $300 million in market capitalization in 6 hours. Our largest institutional investors are demanding explanations. Several are threatening to divest." Patricia Danvers pulled up data on her tablet. "I've received calls from 4 major clients. They're expressing concerns about our corporate culture, our values, our leadership. 3 have requested meetings to discuss the relationship going forward. That's code for considering termination. HR has received complaints from 17 employees in the past 4 hours," another board member added. "All citing Robin's behavior, all emboldened by what happened this morning. Several specifically reference incidents they witnessed but never reported because they feared retaliation." Gerald looked around the table. "Legal." The company's general counsel cleared his throat. "We're exposed. The video constitutes evidence of workplace harassment and potentially assault. Ms. Johnson would have strong grounds for a lawsuit. Even if she doesn't pursue action, other employees might. We need to demonstrate we're taking this seriously, or we'll face regulatory scrutiny and additional legal liability." "PR?" Gerald asked. The communications director looked like she hadn't slept. "We're in full crisis mode. I've issued 3 statements already, but they're being torn apart online. The problem is, we can't spin this. The video is clear. The facts are undeniable. Public sentiment is overwhelmingly against Robin and, by extension, against the company. The only path forward is genuine accountability." Gerald sat down heavily. "Options. Robin resigns," Patricia said immediately. "Today. With a public apology that acknowledges wrongdoing and commits to making amends. We announce a comprehensive review of company culture. We bring in external consultants to examine our practices. We demonstrate that this behavior doesn't represent our values. And if Robin refuses, we terminate him for cause. The video gives us grounds. But that's Messier, opens us up to additional litigation from him, makes us look reactive rather than proactive." Gerald's jaw tightened. "Get him up here. Now." Robin Stark sat in his office on the 34th floor, his chair turned toward the window, his phone face down on his desk. It rang constantly, vibrating with incoming calls he couldn't bring himself to answer. His computer screen displayed his email inbox, the unread count climbing steadily. 247, 251, 258. Messages from board members, investors, colleagues, people he'd considered friends. All demanding explanations, expressing disappointment, distancing themselves from him. His office phone rang again. Melissa's extension. He ignored it, as he'd ignored the previous 12 calls from her. She was trying to manage his calendar, field inquiries, maintain some semblance of normalcy. But there was no normal anymore. Normal had ended the moment Anna Johnson had spoken his name in that lobby. Robin's personal phone showed 3 missed calls from his wife, Catherine. He'd married her 8 years ago, his second marriage, attracted by her social connections and the respectability she brought to his image. They lived in separate wings of their house, maintained appearances at necessary social functions, and largely ignored each other. But even Catherine, emotionally distant as she was, would have questions about the video playing on every news channel. For the first time in his adult life, Robin Stark felt powerless. He'd built his career on control, on dominating every situation, on ensuring he was always the one with leverage. But now, watching the city through his window, he understood with crystalline clarity that he controlled nothing. Not the narrative, not public opinion, not his own fate. The world he'd constructed through intimidation and calculated cruelty was collapsing. And unlike the people he'd crushed over the years, he had no safety net, no one rushing to defend him, no reservoir of goodwill to draw upon. His desk phone rang again. "Melissa." He finally answered. "The board wants to see you immediately," she said, her voice carefully neutral. 35th floor. "They're waiting." Robin hung up without responding. He stood, straightened his tie through muscle memory, and walked to the elevator with the gait of a man approaching his execution. Across town, in the converted warehouse that housed Nexus AI, Anna's team was celebrating. Dev had brought champagne. Lisa had ordered food from their favorite restaurant. James was playing music from a portable speaker. The space filled with laughter, relief, and the giddy energy of people who just achieved something they'd worked toward for years. Anna sat at her desk, smiling at her team's joy but not quite sharing in it. Dev noticed first. He approached with 2 glasses of champagne, offering her one. "You're quiet," he observed. "You just became a billionaire and publicly humiliated the guy who humiliated you. This is supposed to be the best day of your life." Anna accepted the glass but didn't drink. "I don't feel humiliated. I don't know. Like something necessary happened, but I'm not sure how I'm supposed to feel about it." Lisa joined them, her expression more serious now. "You feel vindicated, right? Justice served." "Vindication wasn't the goal," Anna said slowly, working through thoughts she hadn't fully articulated even to herself. "Justice was. And maybe transformation." "You could have destroyed him completely," Dev pointed out. "Could have sued, pressed charges, made sure he never worked again. You gave him a way out instead." "That would have made me just like him," Anna said. "Using power to hurt people, to prove I can, to satisfy some need for revenge. I don't want to tear anyone down. I want to build something better." James approached, his youth making his earnestness more visible. "But he deserved it. He deserved to suffer like he made you suffer." "Maybe," Anna conceded. "But I don't want to be the kind of person who measures success by how much suffering I can inflict on my enemies. I want to measure it by what I build, what I create, what I make possible for other people." The conversation was interrupted by Anna's phone ringing. She glanced at the screen, an incoming call from a number she recognized. One of the largest logistics companies in North America. "I need to take this," she said, stepping away from the celebration. Over the next 48 hours, Anna's calendar filled with meetings. Fortune 500 companies wanting to discuss partnerships. International conglomerates interested in licensing the technology. Venture capital firms offering additional funding. Media outlets requesting interviews. Everyone, it seemed, wanted to be associated with Nexus AI and with the woman who'd faced cruelty with dignity and emerged victorious. The business value of Anna's company skyrocketed. Not just because the technology was revolutionary, though it was, but because Anna represented something people wanted to believe in. Integrity in the face of adversity, intelligence dismissed but ultimately undeniable, the quiet power of someone who built rather than destroyed. She took the meetings with her team, presenting their technology, discussing partnership terms, maintaining the same composed professionalism she'd shown that morning in the Titan Global lobby. But between meetings, in quiet moments, she thought about Robin Stark and wondered if transformation was really possible, or if some people were too committed to cruelty to change. At Titan Global, employees gathered in small groups during breaks, having conversations that had been overdue for years. In the break room, near the copy machine, in offices with doors closed, people talked about what they'd witnessed, what they'd participated in, what they'd tolerated. Some defended Robin. Business requires toughness, they argued. You can't run a company by being everyone's friend. But their voices were quieter now, less certain, aware that defending cruelty made them complicit in it. Most were reflecting on their own behavior. The employees who'd laughed. The ones who'd stood by silently. The ones who'd enabled Robin's pattern of abuse through years of passive acceptance. They were forced to confront uncomfortable questions about their own character, their own moral compromises, their own responsibility for creating an environment where last night's humiliation had been possible. Melissa Park sat at her desk and wrote. She documented every incident she'd witnessed in 5 years of working for Robin Stark. The verbal abuse, the public humiliations, the impossible demands designed to set people up for failure, the pattern of targeting people who couldn't fight back. She wrote for 3 hours, creating a detailed account that spanned 12 pages. Then she sent it to the board of directors, copying HR and legal counsel. Within an hour, other employees began submitting their own accounts. Stories of mistreatment, of fear, of the toxic culture that Robin's leadership had created. The trickle became a flood. By evening, HR had received testimony from over 30 employees, all painting the same picture of systematic cruelty enabled by power and unchecked by accountability. The board reconvened at 8 p.m. They'd spent the afternoon with Robin in a meeting that had been brutal and decisive. Now they had to formalize what had already been decided. Gerald Hutchins called for a vote. All in favor of accepting Mr. Stark's resignation as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately? 8 hands rose. The vote was unanimous. All in favor of the severance package as outlined, conditional upon public apology and compliance with the terms proposed by Ms. Johnson? 8 hands rose again. Gerald nodded, satisfied that they'd done what needed doing, even if it had come years too late. I'll inform him personally. He found Robin in his office, still sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. The board chair didn't bother with pleasantries. The board has voted. You're resigning as CEO, effective immediately. You'll receive your severance package with these conditions. You issue a public apology to Ms. Johnson and any other employees you've mistreated. You agree to the ethical leadership training she proposed. You make the charitable donation she requested. And you never seek employment in any leadership capacity at Titan Global again. Robin's voice was hollow. And if I refuse? Then you're terminated for cause based on the video evidence and the testimony we've received from over 30 employees. You get nothing. You face potential legal action. And you ensure that no reputable company will ever hire you again. Those are your options. Robin understood that this was the end. No negotiations, no leverage, no way to fight. He'd built his power on fear, and now he was discovering that fear was the most unstable foundation possible. I'll resign, he said quietly. Gerald nodded and left without another word. Robin sat alone in his office as the city lights came on below, as his former empire continued functioning without him, as the consequences he'd never expected to face finally, inexorably, arrived. On the 34th floor, the lights went dark one by one as employees finished their shifts and went home. Melissa packed her belongings, knowing that tomorrow would bring change, hoping it would be change for the better. And across town, Anna Johnson sat at her desk in the warehouse office, answering emails, scheduling meetings, building the future she'd imagined during 3 years of invisible work. She'd stood up to cruelty and won not through revenge but through being undeniably, impossibly excellent. Robin Stark had poured ice water over her head, thinking he'd broken her. Instead, he'd broken himself. And Anna had simply continued building, as she'd always done, until the world had no choice but to see her. Justice, she thought, wasn't about making people suffer. It was about making the truth impossible to ignore. And today, finally, everyone had seen it. 3 days after his resignation, Robin Stark held a press conference. The venue was smaller than the Titan Global lobby, a hotel conference room with neutral walls and corporate carpeting. The attendance was smaller too. A dozen journalists, a few cameras, none of the excitement or anticipation that had surrounded Anna's announcement. This was a different kind of story, one of downfall and accountability rather than triumph. Robin sat at a table with a microphone, a glass of water, and a single sheet of paper containing the statement he'd spent 2 days writing and rewriting. He wore a gray suit, but it hung differently on him now, as though he'd somehow become smaller inside his own clothes. His face looked older, the lines deeper, the confidence that had always animated his features now absent. He began reading, his voice steady but lacking the commanding authority it had once carried. 3 days ago, I was asked to resign as CEO of Titan Global Enterprises. I agreed to do so because my behavior had become incompatible with the values that any company should represent. I'm here today to take responsibility for actions that were not just wrong, but cruel. He paused, took a sip of water, then continued. Diana Johnson worked at Titan Global for 3 years. She arrived early each morning to ensure the office was prepared for the day. She did her job with professionalism and dedication, and I never once acknowledged her as a human being. I walked past her for 3 years without seeing her, and when I finally did see her, I treated her with contempt she didn't deserve. His voice caught slightly, and he had to pause before continuing. I fired her without cause. I humiliated her in front of her colleagues. I poured ice water over her head while people laughed, and I felt satisfaction at having broken someone I considered beneath me. There is no excuse for that behavior. None. The journalists watched in silence, recording every word. This wasn't the performative apology of someone trying to salvage their career. This sounded like something else, something closer to genuine remorse. Ms. Johnson, I apologize to you specifically and by name. You deserved respect, dignity, and recognition for your work. Instead, I gave you cruelty. I'm sorry for that, and I understand if you never forgive me. Robin looked up from his paper, speaking now without reading. But Diana isn't the only person I've hurt. Over my years at Titan Global, I've berated employees, made impossible demands, created an environment of fear and intimidation. I convinced myself this was effective leadership. It wasn't. It was abuse enabled by power. He listed names, people he'd publicly humiliated, people he'd fired unfairly, people whose contributions he'd dismissed. Some of the journalists looked surprised by the level of specificity, the apparent genuineness of the accounting. I'm stepping down from Titan Global permanently. I'm donating $5 million to the Workforce Education Foundation, an organization that provides training and education to working-class adults pursuing better opportunities. And I'm committing to undergo the ethical leadership training that Ms. Johnson proposed, not because I expect to return to corporate leadership, but because I need to understand how I became someone capable of that level of cruelty. He folded the paper carefully. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I hope that by taking accountability, I can prevent others from following the path I took, from believing that power gives you the right to treat people as less than human. Thank you. He stood and walked out without taking questions, leaving the journalists to process what they'd witnessed. Anna watched the press conference from her office at Nexus AI. Her team gathered around her laptop screen. When it ended, no one spoke for a moment. Then Dev broke the silence. That actually sounded sincere. Doesn't undo what he did, Lisa said, but her voice lacked its usual edge. No, Anna agreed quietly. But it's a start. Within an hour, journalists were calling for Anna's reaction. She agreed to a brief statement, which her publicist helped coordinate with multiple outlets simultaneously. I watched Mr. Stark's apology, Anna said, her voice measured and thoughtful. I accept it. Accountability is the first step toward genuine change, and I hope he uses this experience to become a better person. What happened to me happens to countless people every day in workplaces across the country. If this moment contributes to changing that culture, then something good will have come from something painful. A journalist asked about Nexus AI's relationship with Titan Global going forward. We'll be partnering with Titan Global under their new leadership, Anna announced. Not because of Robin Stark, but in spite of him. The employees there deserve opportunity and support. They deserve to work for a company with technology that makes their jobs easier and more effective. I won't punish them for their former CEO's failures. It was, observers noted, a masterclass in taking the high road. Anna had every right to destroy Robin completely, to ensure Titan Global suffered maximum consequences. Instead, she'd chosen a path that held individuals accountable while supporting the broader community of workers who had no control over their former leaders' behavior. The Titan Global Board moved quickly to establish new leadership. After intense deliberation, they made an unexpected choice: Melissa Park. She'd been Robin's assistant, which initially seemed to disqualify her. But Melissa had also been the first person to document Robin's pattern of abuse, had submitted detailed testimony that had helped the board understand the depth of the problem, had demonstrated both competence and integrity in a difficult position. On her first day as interim CEO, Melissa addressed the company in a town hall that filled the main auditorium. She stood at the podium without notes, her voice clear and steady. "I worked for Robin Stark for 5 years. I witnessed behavior that I should have reported years ago but didn't because I was afraid. That fear is understandable, but it's not an excuse. I'm part of the culture that allowed this to happen, and changing that culture starts with acknowledging my own failures." The audience was silent, attentive. Effective today, we're implementing several immediate changes. First, anonymous reporting systems for harassment and abuse, managed by an external firm with no connection to company leadership. Second, mandatory training for all managers on ethical leadership and respectful workplace practices. Third, a comprehensive review of our HR policies, conducted by outside consultants who will report directly to the board. She paused, making eye contact with people throughout the room. But policy changes aren't enough. Culture changes when we change, individually and collectively. It changes when we stop tolerating cruelty, stop making excuses for abuse, stop prioritizing short-term results over long-term integrity. That transformation starts today, and it starts with each of us choosing to treat every person in this building with dignity and respect, regardless of their position. The applause was genuine, carrying hope that things might actually be different this time. Nexus AI's success accelerated dramatically in the months following Anna's public emergence. The publicity from her story brought attention far beyond what traditional marketing could have achieved. But more importantly, companies wanted to partner with someone who represented values they aspired to embody. Within 3 months, Nexus AI signed partnerships with 12 major corporations spanning logistics, retail, manufacturing, and technology. Each partnership brought revenue, validation, and opportunities for growth. The company's valuation doubled, then tripled. Anna hired aggressively, building teams in engineering, sales, customer success, and implementation. But Anna's vision extended beyond corporate success. She established the Diana Johnson Foundation with an initial endowment of $50 million, dedicated to providing education and business mentorship to working-class individuals, with a particular focus on women and people of color who faced systematic barriers to opportunity. The foundation offered scholarships for technical training, business courses, and degree programs. It provided mentorship matching successful professionals with people trying to break into new fields. It funded small business loans for entrepreneurs who couldn't access traditional financing. Anna also became a sought-after speaker. She gave commencement addresses at community colleges, spoke at conferences about innovation and leadership, visited high schools in underserved communities to talk about her journey from multiple minimum wage jobs to billionaire CEO. Her message was consistent. Worth isn't determined by position or credentials, persistence and vision matter more than pedigree, and the people society overlooks often have the clearest view of what needs to change. Robin Stark, meanwhile, largely disappeared from public life. There were occasional reports. He'd enrolled in a leadership ethics program at a university. He'd been seen volunteering at a job training center. He'd reached out to his children, attempting to rebuild relationships damaged by years of prioritizing career over family. It was unclear whether his transformation was genuine or performative, whether he'd truly changed or was simply performing the steps required to rehabilitate his image. Some people believed redemption was possible, that even someone who'd done terrible things could learn and grow and become better. Others believed consequences were simply justice, that losing everything was what Robin deserved regardless of any future transformation. Both perspectives carried truth. Robin would never undo the harm he'd caused, never fully compensate for the pain he'd inflicted. But he also might, through sustained effort over years, become someone different than the man who'd poured ice water over a woman's head for his own satisfaction. The question of whether that mattered, of whether change that came only after consequences still counted as redemption, remained open. 6 months after the incident, Anna returned to the Titan Global building. She arrived at 10 a.m. for a partnership implementation meeting, walking through the same lobby where she'd held her press conference. The space looked unchanged. Same marble floors, same modern furniture, same tall windows overlooking the city. But everything felt different. Employees recognized her as she crossed to the elevators. They smiled, some waving, others nodding respectfully. A junior executive stopped to thank her for partnering with the company despite everything that had happened. A facilities manager approached to say he'd applied for a scholarship from her foundation. Anna rode the elevator to the 34th floor, the same floor she'd cleaned for 3 years. She walked past the break room where she'd made coffee for executives who'd never learned her name, past the corridor where Robin had confronted her, past the spot where ice water had soaked through her uniform while people laughed. Melissa met her at the conference room entrance, extending her hand with a warm smile. "Diana, thank you for coming. The team is excited to discuss implementation." Inside the conference room, 8 Titan global executives waited. The new heads of operations, logistics, technology, finance. They stood when Anna entered, greeting her with genuine respect, eager to discuss how Nexus AI's platform would integrate with their systems. Anna sat at the conference table, the same table she'd once wiped down with cleaning solution, and opened her laptop to begin the presentation. She was in the same building, but everything had changed. She'd returned not as someone invisible but as someone impossible to ignore, not as someone dismissed but as someone essential. The meeting lasted 2 hours, productive and collaborative. They discussed technical specifications, implementation timelines, training requirements. The executives asked intelligent questions, took detailed notes, expressed genuine enthusiasm about the partnership. As Anna packed up to leave, Melissa walked her to the elevator. "I want you to know," Melissa said quietly, "we're trying to be different. To build the kind of culture where what happened to you could never happen again." "I know," Anna replied. "Change is hard. It takes time. But you're doing the work, and that matters." The elevator arrived, and Anna stepped inside. As the doors closed, she caught one final glimpse of the 34th floor, the space where she'd spent 3 years being invisible, where she'd endured casual cruelty, where she'd been humiliated in front of a crowd. She smiled slightly. The past couldn't be changed, but the future could be built. And she was building it, one partnership, one foundation scholarship, one speech to overlooked young people at a time. Robin Stark had tried to break her, had used his power to make her feel insignificant. Instead, she'd simply continued building until her significance became undeniable. And in doing so, she transformed not just her own life but the lives of countless others who'd been told they didn't matter, who'd been dismissed, who'd been treated as invisible. The elevator descended, carrying Anna back to ground level, back to her work, back to the future she was creating with vision, integrity, and unshakable knowledge of her own worth. The janitor had become a billionaire, and the world would never be quite the same. 1 year after the bucket incident, as it had come to be known, Anna Johnson appeared on the cover of Forbes magazine. The photograph showed her in the Nexus AI office, standing before a whiteboard covered in algorithms, wearing jeans and a simple sweater rather than formal business attire. The headline read, "The CEO Who Cleaned Her Way to the Top. How Diana Johnson Built a Billion-Dollar Company While the World Wasn't Watching." The article inside was extensive, detailing her journey from multiple minimum wage jobs to community college to self-taught programmer to billionaire entrepreneur. But more significantly, it examined the broader cultural impact of her story. Business schools were now teaching her case as an example of ethical leadership and resilience. Companies were re-examining how they treated lower-level employees, implementing policies to ensure everyone was seen and valued. The hashtag #WhoAreYouNotSeeing had gone viral, encouraging people to notice the invisible workers who made their lives function. Anna's story had become larger than one woman's triumph over humiliation. It had become a catalyst for examining power, dignity, and the assumptions people made about worth based on position. The Diana Johnson Foundation had grown beyond Anna's initial vision. With an expanded endowment of $200 million, the foundation had provided full scholarships to over 500 working adults seeking education and career transformation. The success stories were remarkable. Carmen Torres, a former hotel housekeeper, had completed an intensive coding bootcamp funded by the foundation and now worked as a software engineer earning 6 figures. Michael Jefferson, who'd spent 15 years in warehouse logistics, had received business training and launched a successful supply chain consulting firm. Rachel Kim, a single mother who'd worked 3 part-time jobs, had earned her nursing degree and now managed a healthcare clinic. Anna made it a point to meet with each cohort of scholarship recipients personally. She sat in circles with them, listening to their stories, sharing her own, answering questions about how she'd maintained hope during years when her potential went unrecognized. "The hardest part wasn't the work," she told one group. "It was believing in myself when no one else did. When you're invisible for long enough, you start to wonder if maybe they're right about you, if maybe you really are insignificant. You have to hold on to your own sense of worth even when the world tells you otherwise." A woman in the group raised her hand tentatively. "How did you do that? How did you keep believing?" Anna considered the question carefully. "I focused on what I was building rather than what people thought of me. Every line of code I wrote, every problem I solved, every small progress I made, that was proof of my capability. Not to them, but to myself. And eventually, the work spoke for itself loud enough that they had to listen." Nexus AI had grown dramatically. The company now employed over 300 people across engineering, sales, operations, customer success, and business development. The office had moved from the converted warehouse to a modern space with natural light, collaborative work areas, and amenities that supported work-life balance. But what made Nexus AI special wasn't the space or the success. It was the culture Anna had built intentionally, remembering every moment of invisibility she'd endured at Titan Global. Every employee was treated with respect, regardless of their role. The compensation structure was transparent, with clear bands published internally and regular reviews to ensure equity. The organizational structure was deliberately flat, encouraging input from all levels. Junior engineers could challenge senior architects if they had better solutions. Administrative staff were included in strategic planning meetings because they often had insights others missed. Anna still remembered what it felt like to be dismissed, to have your perspective ignored, to be treated as though your thoughts and observations had no value. She'd built a company where that couldn't happen, where everyone's voice mattered, where good ideas were recognized regardless of who proposed them. The technology continued to evolve. The platform now served 42 major corporate clients, preventing supply chain disruptions that would have cost billions in aggregate. Anna's team was developing new capabilities. Integration with emerging technologies, expansion into new industries, features that addressed problems they discovered only through implementation. The company was positioned to go public within a year. Investment analysts were projecting valuations that would triple or quadruple Anna's personal wealth. She'd already be one of the richest self-made women in America. After the IPO, she'd be in a different category entirely. But Anna found that wealth, beyond a certain point, was just a number. What mattered was what she could build, what she could create, what she could make possible for others. Robin Stark had not returned to the corporate world. Reports filtered through occasionally from people who'd known him. He'd divorced Catherine, a separation that had been inevitable for years. He'd sold the mansion in the hills, the yacht he'd rarely used, the collection of expensive cars. He now lived in a modest house in a different city, one where his name didn't carry the weight of his failures. Some former colleagues reported that he'd changed genuinely, that the public humiliation had broken something in him that needed breaking, had forced him to confront who he'd become and make different choices. He volunteered regularly at workforce development programs, teaching resume writing and interview skills, though he never mentioned his own history. He'd completed the ethical leadership training, not as a checkbox but as genuine education. He'd rebuilt relationships with his children, slowly and with difficulty, acknowledging the ways he'd failed them. Others remained skeptical, viewing his transformation as performance, a calculation that acting reformed was better than being known forever as the villain in someone else's triumph story. Anna didn't follow his story closely. She'd see occasional mentions in articles about her own journey, references to the CEO who humiliated her, or the boss who didn't recognize her potential. But she didn't seek out information about Robin's life after Titan Global. She'd moved forward, and what he did with his remaining years was his concern, not hers. She hoped he'd genuinely changed. Not for his sake, but because genuine change would mean one less person in the world using power to harm others. But whether he had or hadn't didn't affect her trajectory. She was building a future, not dwelling on the past. Titan Global had transformed under Melissa Park's leadership. The company's employee satisfaction scores had climbed from the 32nd percentile to the 84th. Turnover had decreased by 40%. The partnership with Nexus AI had improved operational efficiency by 32% while reducing costs by 18%. Under Melissa's guidance, Titan Global had become living proof that ethical leadership and business success weren't mutually exclusive. The company was profitable, growing, and maintaining a culture that valued every employee's contribution. Melissa credited Anna's example with giving her the courage to speak up and lead differently. Watching Diana stand there with ice water dripping from her hair and not break, that showed me what real strength looks like, Melissa said in an interview. And watching her offer Robin a path toward redemption rather than just destroying him, that taught me what real power looks like. Not the power to harm, but the power to transform. The partnership between Titan Global and Nexus AI had become a case study in how confronting past wrongs could create future opportunities, how accountability could be the foundation for genuine collaboration. On a quiet Thursday evening, Anna sat alone in her corner office at Nexus AI headquarters. The view from the 20th floor overlooked the city, the buildings lit against the darkening sky, the streets below carrying people home from work or out to evening plans. She thought about that night 1 year ago. Standing in the Titan Global lobby, ice water soaking through her uniform, ice cubes scattered at her feet, laughter echoing off the glass walls. She thought about Robin Stark's satisfied smirk, about the employees who'd watched without intervening, about the cold walk to her car with dignity as her only shield. She thought about the 3 years before that night. Arriving at 5 a.m. to clean offices before executives arrived. Moving invisibly through spaces, dismissed and ignored. Hearing confidential information because people forgot she existed. Learning about their failures and inefficiencies while they assumed she understood nothing. And she thought about everything that had come after. The press conference that had changed everything. The partnerships, the success, the foundation, the platform to speak about dignity and worth. The power not just to build a company but to create change in how people thought about work, about value, about the humans they overlooked every day. The journey from invisible to undeniable. From dismissed to essential. From janitor to billionaire. Not because those roles were inherently different in worth, but because the world finally saw what had always been true. Anna gave the keynote address at a women's leadership conference the following week. 2,000 people filled the auditorium, and thousands more watched via live stream. She stood on the stage without notes, speaking from experience rather than script. For 3 years, I was invisible, she began. People looked past me, through me, around me. I cleaned their offices, emptied their trash, made their workspaces ready for their important work. And they never saw me as a person with thoughts, dreams, capabilities. I was just a function. Just the janitor. She paused, making eye contact with people throughout the audience. But invisibility isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's perspective. I saw things that people who are always seen never notice. I learned things that people who are always heard never learn. I understood their problems better than they did because I wasn't invested in maintaining the systems that created those problems. Anna walked across the stage, her voice building with quiet intensity. And when I finally stepped into visibility, I did it on my own terms, with my own power. Not power given to me by someone else's approval, but power I'd built through 3 years of work that no one was watching. That's the kind of power that can't be taken away, because it was never dependent on someone else seeing you. The audience was completely silent, absorbed. So here's my invitation to you, Anna said. Look around your workplace, your community, your life. Who are the invisible people? Who's being overlooked? The janitor, the security guard, the administrative assistant, the delivery driver, the person serving your coffee. What would you learn if you actually saw them? What would change if you treated everyone as if they matter? She smiled slightly. Because they do. Everyone does. That's not idealism. That's just truth. And building a world that reflects that truth isn't just moral, it's profitable. It's sustainable. It's the future. The most valuable insights often come from the people closest to the problems, and those people are usually the ones everyone's ignoring. The speech concluded to a standing ovation. Afterward, dozens of people approached to share their own stories of being overlooked, of being dismissed, of finding ways to build power when the world told them they had none. That evening, Anna returned to her office. Most of the Nexus AI team had gone home, but a few dedicated engineers remained, working on problems that captivated them. Anna settled at her desk and opened her laptop, pulling up code for the next iteration of their platform. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dev. "Remember when we started this in that cramped workspace with 4 laptops and a dream? Look at us now." Anna smiled and typed back, "We're just getting started." She set down her phone and looked at her reflection in the dark window. The glass showed both images superimposed. The woman she was now, successful and recognized, and the ghost of who she'd been, invisible and dismissed. The janitor and the billionaire, occupying the same space, the same person. They'd always been the same person. The only difference was that now, the world saw what she'd always known. That worth isn't determined by position or power, but by character, intelligence, and the courage to keep building even when everyone tells you you're invisible. Anna returned to her work, her fingers moving across the keyboard with the same precision they'd brought to cleaning, but here creating rather than maintaining, building rather than serving. Outside, the city lights glowed against the night sky. Inside, she built the future, one line of code at a time. Somewhere in the city, perhaps in a dozen cities, perhaps in 100, people who'd once thought themselves invisible watched her story unfold. They saw someone who'd been dismissed prove everyone wrong. They saw someone who'd been humiliated refuse to be broken. They saw someone who'd been told she didn't matter demonstrate that she mattered more than anyone had imagined. And they found their own courage to be seen, to speak up, to build their own power, not through cruelty or dominance, but through competence, persistence, and unshakable knowledge of their own worth. Anna Johnson had started as a janitor and become a billionaire. But her legacy wasn't wealth. It was the invitation she extended to everyone who'd ever been overlooked. You matter. Your perspective matters. Your dreams matter. Build something that proves it, and eventually, the world will have no choice but to see. She saved her work and closed her laptop. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to build something that mattered. But tonight, she sat in quiet satisfaction, knowing she'd transformed not just her own life but the lives of countless others who'd been told they were invisible. The janitor had cleaned her way to the top. And in doing so, she'd cleaned away some of the assumptions that kept talented people overlooked, some of the barriers that kept good ideas unheard, some of the cruelty that came from unchecked power. The work wasn't finished. It would never be finished. But it had begun, and Anna Johnson would keep building, keep creating, keep showing the world what was possible when you refused to accept someone else's judgment of your worth. The city lights glowed. The future waited. And Anna, as always, kept working. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.